Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is Marie Suazo, host of the podcast Talks with a TCK Friend and author of Tales of a Diplomat's Daughter. Originally from the Philippines, Marie grew up in South Korea and Egypt during her family's diplomatic assignments. She loved being part of the expat communities in both places and did not know any difference until she was on a rough home assignment in the Philippines for several years in her preteens. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part one of Marie's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
We have Marie Suazo on with our Round Trip Stories podcast today. We're so excited to have her. Marie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a great honor.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marie, for waking up early. You're in the Philippines. We are here in California, and through the wonders of technology, we are getting to converse.
And Marie is a fellow podcaster. We met her through social media, and she does a podcast as well.
Yes. And what exactly is the name of your podcast, Marie?
It's called Talks with a TCK Friend.
All right. So I'm really looking forward to getting to hear your story. Tracy has read your book. I have not. And so I can't wait to hear all about your growing up because I know it's been worth writing a book about. Let's just say that. So as we get started, the first thing that we like to hear is what we call the backstory. So tell us first a little bit about yourself and your life now, and then tell us a little bit about your family and where you grew up.
All right. So here we go.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from the Philippines. I was born in the Philippines, but I actually moved to Seoul, South Korea at the age of 3. And from there, most of my elementary school years, from kindergarten all the way to 4th grade, so until I was 11 years old, was in Korea. So that was the life that I understood, going to an international school, living with Filipino parents, and my 2 younger brothers. And then eventually, after I turned 11, we moved back to the Philippines. And so that was my very first shock into my passport country. Like, I've gone there for vacation before. I've known what that was like, but to actually live there and to be part of a community and where I felt like I was othered, and even though it was an international school, it didn't really feel like it. It was still mostly Filipinos, a couple of Koreans here and there, a far cry from a whole bunch of diplomatic kids and missionary kids and all of that in an international school.
Right.
And so after that, we moved to Egypt, and I was also part of a really big international community. And so I felt more at home there. And I went to college. I went back to Seoul, South Korea for college and grad school. And I ended up moving back to the Philippines with my family after 10 years as an adult in Korea. So Korea holds a very special place in my heart. So, yeah. Oh, and I'm back in the Philippines, and I've been here ever since.
All right. So you moved to these places. We've interviewed people who, TCKs who have moved abroad because their parents were teachers or because their parents were missionaries. But you have a totally different story about why your parents took you abroad. So tell us, why did you end up in Korea and in Egypt?
So my mom is a diplomat, and my dad tagged along because one of their non-negotiables was that they didn't want to split the family, no matter where they went. And so, the government covers the family going with the person who's going to be going abroad. And so that's how we ended up moving to different countries. And even when I was in college, when I went back to Korea for college, my parents still kept moving. They lived in Oman, they lived in Canada. And so twice a year I would go there for vacation and spend time with them. And so I say that I also grew up in those places, but like by choice, this time I went to go visit them. And so, yeah, that is usually how it works.
And so when you say diplomat, does that mean that she was like an ambassador or just worked with the
embassy or consulate?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Embassy or consulate or something.
So just as an explanation, there's an embassy for countries in different nations, and diplomats are there to represent that country,
Yeah.
to help the people that are living there. And so my mom was an ambassador, but everybody who is considered to be brought by the government to another country is considered a diplomat because they are representing the country. So people who, if you need help with passports and things like that, you go to your local embassy and they'll help you with the paperwork, etc.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought that up because you did write a book. And go ahead and why don't you tell us a little bit about that book?
Okay, so my book is called Tales of a Diplomat's Daughter. And the reason why I wrote the book was because I just felt like I was having similar conversations about my life story with a lot of other third culture kids. And I was like, okay, like, and they could relate and they could totally understand where I was coming from and they wanted to know more about it until I was just encouraged to write a book. I've always loved to write. I'm a writer through and through, found myself
Mm-hmm.
always at school newspapers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just ended up writing a book out of just sheer feeling like people just needed to feel less alone,
Yeah.
knowing that there was someone else like me who, went through what I went through. And I think it was just kind of like a service to little Marie, where she felt so alone, having to move around and not really having those conversations. And so I guess this is like a love letter to myself.
We can't wait to hear about your stories growing up. So tell us a favorite story or memory of your time growing up in either Seoul or Egypt.
I think one of my favorite ones is when we were living in Egypt, and it's a very biblical place, right? Like, Red Sea, all that stuff. Not Red Sea, sorry, Nile River, Pharaoh, plagues, that whole kind of thing. And I remember there was this one Easter, because at this point, snow always associated with home for me. So growing up in Korea, it always snowed. We had 4 seasons. And when we went to the Philippines, of course, it's a tropical area. We never got snow. And I remember really craving for snow. And I remember praying this little prayer. It wasn't even like, a I'm in my prayer closet praying about these prayers kind of thing. It was just like, it would be nice if I got snow, God, just nonchalantly. And there was this one Easter. So just letting the audience know. Egypt never gets rain. If we do, we celebrate even if it's half an inch or half a centimeter of rain. And so on our way for Easter, some of us wanted to go up to Mount Sinai and just kind of do like a little worship service there with like my
That's
parents'
cool.
small group with other Filipinos. And I remember it poured. Like I had to lead prayer right before we left. They actually waited for me to lead prayer for church because I was assigned to lead prayer at church. So I did my prayer and it was already pouring rain. Like it's like I've
Wow.
never seen rain pour like that, like I did ever since moving to Egypt. So I prayed, we hopped on the bus, and then there was just such a bad traffic jam all the way downtown because it was raining. And we just did, like, Egypt is not used to
Sure.
handling a lot of rain. And so by the time we got to Mount Sinai, it was like 2 a.m. And then we wanted to climb it so that we could see the sunrise. And as we got there, it was like super cloudy. And so we're like, oh no, it's like not, I guess it's not worth it having to go all the way up here because we didn't see the sunrise, etc. And I remember looking up into the sky and I just saw like these little flurries. And I was like, I remember thinking, Mom, what is this? And she said, honey, it's snow. And I was like,
My goodness.
no way. Like just because I was yearning for snow, just because I was like homesick for snow, you're
Oh.
gonna give me snow on Easter? Like,
Wow.
what is that?
Wow.
On Mount Sinai.
Yeah, on
Yeah,
Mount
on
Sinai.
Mount Sinai. Just
No big deal.
yeah.
Yeah, and it does snow on Mount Sinai, but it's like during the winter months, like,
Yeah.
anytime between December to February. But we went in April. So there was like no like weather pattern, understanding of like how this could have happened. And for me, that was my little like, oh my gosh, like God really
Yeah.
cares no matter where I go. Oh my gosh, I get teary-eyed just talking
Yeah.
about it because it's like, it's just because I wanted it and you just gave it to me and you decided to change the weather. just because I wanted to see it. And they're like photos of me in the mountain on a camel with snow around me. So yeah, one of my favorite stories.
I love that so much. And, like I think how it doesn't matter whether God made it snow just for you or whether he knew it was going to snow. And so he had you pray that prayer because he knew that it was something that you were longing for and that he wanted to give you this surprise. Like, just what a personal and sweet, amazing gift from God. That is beautiful. How old
Yeah.
were you at that point?
Oh my goodness. I think I was like 13. No, I wasn't. I think I was like 15.
Hmm.
Yeah.
God does give us little gifts, right? That was obviously a big gift, but just like little beautiful gifts to say, I'm here, I'm listening to you.
I see you no matter where
Yeah.
in this crazy world you are. I see you. And
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story. And that is not in the book,
Definitely not in the book.
but it's here. That's awesome. So Marie, and now we're going to go to talk about something that was hard. So go ahead and share a story about something that was hard while you were growing up outside of the Philippines.
Um, okay, maybe not outside of the Philippines. I think my hard things was moving back to the Philippines because in my world and my understanding ever since I was young was that this is my life, like going to international school, living in Korea. Honestly, like I'm not gonna lie, I don't really find any fault in like the difficulties living abroad. Because it was my childhood. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that yeah. So I guess one of the hardest things for me as a TCK is moving back to my passport country. At that point, I'm talking about the not repatriating completely, but as per the government's request, most of the assignments are 6 years abroad. So that's what we call it, assignments. You go on a diplomatic assignment abroad, 6 years usually, but some people tend to split it in half. So, especially if the assignment is a little bit more difficult, like let's say a country is, the country is going through like political turmoil, things like that. Oftentimes they'll swap out people faster than they would keep families there longer. So you can split it. It's totally up to you. You would have to file a request, but based on uh, the government assignments that are sent to diplomats here, it's that they live 6 years abroad and then they move back for 2 to 3 years back home, home meaning the Philippines, and then 6 years abroad again. Yeah, until you retire, unless you want to do something else, and then just leave the whole diplomatic force altogether.
And so was that hard for you to go back and forth?
Yeah. So I think one of the difficult things that I really encountered being abroad was just saying goodbyes. I think for me, I almost thought that it was normal. I never knew how to deal with the emotions that come with leaving, people leaving, me leaving. I always thought it was just like a natural part of life. And from what I was taught, and these are some of the things that I wrote in the book, was that whether or not my parents said it verbally, I really felt like emotions were just to suck it up and move on. I was never taught to process it. I was never taught to talk about it. And I was just taught that if somebody leaves, you'll see them again. It's not goodbye. And so I didn't know what to do with the sadness and the grief that comes with that. And I think that was the most difficult thing. As a kid, it was more like rotational where it's like, oh, next year, I guess I'll see so and so. Oh, so and so is coming back kind of thing. But then the more that I grew up and the more invested I became in certain friendships, that's when it started to hurt more. And so
Yeah.
I think that would be what I would consider the difficult parts of being abroad compared to, I mean, sure, the cultures, having to learn new things, like navigating through the city and all that stuff. I think it was definitely secondary to having to say goodbye to people that you've gotten to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you went back to the Philippines for that 2 to 3 year stint, in your book, you mentioned something that was difficult.
Yeah, I think because at the end of the day, when I was growing up in Korea, that was all I understood of the world. I thought that's how the world operated, that people went to international schools and then their after schools activities were all in Korean because I went to piano school in Korean and whatnot, and they lived with Filipino families. Like, this was kind of just because I was really young, right? Like I moved when I was 3 and that was my understanding of the world for years until we had to leave. And so when I went to the Philippines, it was really difficult because it's like everyone was Filipino. Like it was, and then people didn't live abroad. Like people didn't know what truly an international school looked like. Like their understanding of an international school, like I didn't go to the top international schools because like some of the international schools were like insanely expensive, and um, we weren't sent by the government anymore. It's just like we're a citizen. So like the pay was, different. um being like the allowance for kids' education was different. And so it was really difficult because I couldn't go to the same kind of level of international schools that I was used to, where all of the diplomat kids were going. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
an international school and where it was mostly Filipino and just like a sprinkle of Koreans and like one missionary white family.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really difficult for me because I felt like I was just misunderstood. I think a lot of my classmates, they understood how to interact with a fellow Filipino. They understood how to interact with Koreans, but they didn't know how to interact with someone who looked like them but didn't speak like them or think like them. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
was where, the teenage years are difficult enough, all the more having to add this level of um, confusion,
Yeah.
misunderstanding, and, emotions are heightened all the more
Mm-hmm.
during this age. And so I found that quite difficult, just feeling like nobody understood me, constant insecurities of, do people even like me for being who I am? And most of the time I didn't feel like they did.
I love that you talk about what a great experience it was to live in Seoul and to live in Egypt. So let's talk about something else you loved about your time living in those two different countries.
Oh my gosh, I think it's just the community. Like I loved Egypt because we lived in a small town. And in the small town, because I lived on one end of the small town, and then if you walk to the other side, it's 45 minutes. So, and there was only like one really main road for like restaurants and like stationaries and bookstores and things like that. Very small town, and you always ran into somebody from church or school or someone like eating at one of the very few restaurants. And I just felt like I had the freedom to just be. I just loved it. I loved being part of a really big church community, a school community, and just walking around my city, my hometown, freely, and texting each other and being like, "Hey, I'll be at your house at this time. Like, what time do you want to come over and bake cookies?" Like that kind of
Oh,
experience. And I don't have that here in the Philippines. Like everything is a lot more widespread. And I'm sure there are cities in Egypt as well that are super widespread, but it was a lot easier um
Mm-hmm.
just to walk around. And I felt like it was kind of like what do you call it? Uh an expat bubble because missionary families live there, diplomat families live there, business. Because one of the bigger schools was there too. I didn't go to that one, but the bigger school was there, and so a lot of the families that were expats lived within the vicinity. So
Mm.
yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And so was your mom working in that small community, or did she? Okay, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
So a lot of the embassies are there too. So
Huh.
yeah.
hmm.
I always picture embassies and places like that being in big cities.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the country you're in, because in
Yeah.
Oman, there's one section of the city where it's all just embassies. So, like, you'll drive through, it's like the Philippine embassy, and then the Nigerian embassy, and then the Peruvian embassy. Like, you literally drive in a straight line. And so it depends on the city that you live in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Interesting.
how old the embassy section is
Mhm.
too, right?
Yeah.
I love the small town feeling that expats communities can have. Um, the same, like when we were in China, just like riding your bike and going to church clothes, going to the international school clothes, or working at the international school. Um, yeah, it's a really sweet community.
So, Marie, you have a podcast even about talks with a TCK friend. So, clearly, being a TCK is something that you have thought about quite a lot. So, do you remember when you realized that you were a TCK?
I think maybe not in terminology, but I think it was always there thrown around. So I don't think it sinked in until way later in life. But when you're in an expat bubble, you don't feel like you need the terminology for those things because everybody is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so even when I moved to the Philippines, like people weren't talking about it and that kind of thing. So it wasn't in the forefront of my mind. But I
Mm-hmm.
did know what a TCK was, and I did know that I was one. But I think the two and two did not, interact and clash, and it didn't hit me until way later on when I needed the vocabulary to search
Mm-hmm.
for other third culture kids, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And how did you find it at that point? Or what was that journey like looking for that support?
I think it started in the pandemic, shocker. A lot
Mm.
of things happened during then. But for me, I was working a remote job, and I remember feeling like it felt so purposeless. And I'm not the type of person that can just work a job separately and, do what I love to do. Like it had to be both. And so during that time, I was like this was around the time people were encouraging me to write a book. And then I eventually started writing and looking for this community because I was just like, there's so many people who are probably going through similar things that I'm going through, but never get the chance to talk about it, or even they don't even know that they're needing it or yearning for it because they
Mhm.
probably didn't grow up with the terminology. So, yeah, I think my personal discovery of it is just encouraging other people to kind of be a part of it and learning along the way. I'm currently interning at a place called TCK Training, and that's where I started getting a little bit more knowledge about
Mm.
what a TCK goes through, what kind of very unique needs do they need to be met as children, things that we didn't have like 10,
Mhm.
15 years ago. So a lot more data and research has been um, done for third culture kids. And yeah, like I think that was my personal journey, and I feel like I'm still learning, and I feel like I'm still grieving so many things that
Mhm.
I've gone through in the past that I didn't even know needed to be grieved because you just move. That's it, right? Like you don't really
Yeah.
do anything about that. You just move and then that's it.
As you're reflecting on sort of that process and that journey, you mentioned how there are things that you're realizing now that you needed to grieve that you hadn't even realized. Is there anything that you can think of or that you have thought of that you wish that your parents would have realized or known back in the day that maybe parents now would benefit from knowing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've just been really sitting on lately is I think it was one of the forewords of one of Lauren Wells's book. I'm not exactly sure which of the books, but in one of them, I was talking about it with someone. Um, they say that parents who put their kids through international schools or like this very mobile lifestyle somehow unintentionally alienates their child from their culture. And
Mm.
from themselves. And I think that is one thing that made perfect sense to me, where I don't think my parents understood the cost of what it was
Mhm.
going to be in order for me to like be separated from my culture. Because in their head, it's like English speaking, global mindset that will lead to more open, jobs, these kinds of things.
Mhm.
Better life equals money equals career. I think that
Mhm.
was like in the forefront of their minds, which isn't a bad thing, but I don't think they understood the price that they would have to pay, and where
Right.
I don't fully understand my Filipino culture. I don't understand their values and their traditions. And a lot of times there's
Mhm.
a lot of cultural clashes
Mhm.
because they're insistent on wanting certain things done a certain way. And I don't agree with that because I didn't go to college in the Philippines. A lot of TCKs do because it's so much cheaper. And I guess it really depends on where you end up. Because I know some Filipino diplomat kids, they end up staying in the culture they feel comfortable, like just like I did. I went back to Korea. Like I know a friend who stayed in Vienna because apparently the tuition fee is so much cheaper in Vienna than it is in the Philippines. And so really depends. And I feel like because my educational background is so diverse and so different from my parents, there's just this unintentional alienation between me and them that they didn't
Yeah.
know was going to be the cost of putting me up for international schools and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could see that they would anticipate that they've lived in these other places. They have a global worldview. So they would think that you would end up with a similar global worldview plus Filipino worldview because that's what they had. Whereas you ended up with the global worldview without the Filipino cultural foundation that they had. And so it comes out to be different because it's a different mix. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think that is something that we don't necessarily, or that parents don't always anticipate or expect. Yeah.
And also, yeah, as a parent, I don't think I even thought about that when I took my kids to China at first because they were so little. And then we moved back when the oldest was 11. But, there's, an international move could be in the future again. And it's just really good for us parents to think about, right, the effects that it has on the kiddos. And I think that I concentrate on that part. I concentrate on the global worldview. I concentrate on the speaking more than one language part because it's so important to me. But I am very rooted in my American culture, and so it's not their experience will not be the same as mine. So thank you for saying that.
And don't you think, Tracy, as parents, that we kind of assume that our kids are going to pick up our personal culture from us? And so I think that we maybe just would think that they're going to get the bigger culture and they're also going to get our immediate culture. And I guess we just kind of forget that it takes more than just our immediate family to create that sense of cultural belonging. And yeah, so that's really interesting to think about. Our last question for this first half of our interview with you, Marie, before we talk more about your repatriation in our part 2 of our interview with you. So for now, can you give us kind of a last reflection on how has growing up as a TCK influenced your worldview?
Oh, wow. I
I
think
know.
it's a lot. I think I will say one way that it's influenced me is that I'm able to understand different cultures a lot easier, in where if I meet someone and they don't react or respond in the way that I understand, I know that it's nothing personal. It's that maybe in their culture, it's a little bit different. Like I know a friend told me about Thailand where you don't ever shake someone's hand with your left hand, that kind of thing, just cultural things like that. And being able to adjust in understanding that, wherein if I grew up in one place, like maybe I would have had just one understanding of the world. Yeah, so I think that's one thing
Yeah.
that I have learned growing up as a third culture kid.
Yes, that's great. That's a good example, and you're absolutely right. Well, thanks, Marie. We can't wait to hear the rest of your story when we come back for part 2.
Thanks, Marie.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Marie, for sharing your round-trip stories from South Korea and Egypt. Some of the hardest parts were the goodbyes and the grief that came with it. You loved the international community, which allowed you to meet people from all over the world, right down the street. You didn't want to leave that. And God gave you comfort, even when you felt homesick for snow like you grew up with in Korea. God gave you that precious gift right on Mount Sinai at Easter. So, what happened when Marie returned to the Philippines? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Marie's round trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to the Round Trip Stories podcast in your favorite podcast app and sign up for our email list at roundtripstories.com so you'll never miss an episode. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.